Hello everyone, it's System Check 66. Welcome to the channel. And you know what we're going to talk about today? I mean, the title of the video says it all, but we're going to talk about Zack Cregger's Resident Evil film that is coming out in September. Being able to talk about this film means that I'm going to talk about the leaks and how they add up to the latest trailer that came out. And to be honest, it's not looking good. Like, it's looking really, really disappointing, definitely. I was kind of hoping that the leaks and stuff weren't true, but it seems like they are. And we're going to talk about sort of like some things that have been said in terms of like Capcom holding on to the rights, you know, of the IP, or drip feeding, apparently drip feeding these companies, you know, bits and pieces from the source material, which just isn't true at this point. Seeing the amount of films that have actually used the source material, you know, in bad ways, and sometimes in regards to Welcome to Raccoon City, I guess in good ways. But first I want to talk about that Silent Evil Resident Within trailer that dropped recently. I thought that the trailer was cool in terms of a horror trailer, you know, just a kind of standard horror trailer. It reminded me of Silent Hill and Evil Within more than anything else. It barely resembles Resident Evil, let's be honest. But what I find strange is a lot of people saying that they think it looks like Resident Evil. Now, we've had a lot of tourists jump into the series to the point where you could literally, I don't know, show an action movie trailer, just a generic action movie trailer, and slap Resident Evil onto it, and people go, oh yeah, it reminds me of Resident Evil 5 or Resident Evil 6. And then say stuff like, yeah, well, it's Resident Evil because Resident Evil 5 had action in it. That's literally the argument. And a lot of us would say, well, you know, Resident Evil 5 is a bit of a black sheep of the series, yeah? Like, when it comes to Resident Evil, in terms of what sort of like OG fans really want from a Resident Evil experience. But a lot of people would turn around and say, no, it's definitely Resident Evil for that fact. And that's what we're getting now. It's like, okay, so it's dark, it's moody, there's a cabin or a house, you know, that the main protagonist finds. He picks up a shotgun, and then there's zombies in it. And so people are instantly going, yeah, that's Resident Evil. No, it isn't. That's literally any setup for any horror film ever made. Okay, we're talking about Evil Dead 2 here. We're talking about just any horror film that has a little bit of action in there. You know, that is sort of what you're getting with this. Like, that's what the trailer showed off. And a lot of people say, no, it's like Resident Evil. It's not. Some people have said, oh, it runs concurrent with the timeline of 2 and 3. No, it doesn't. Because, one, it's not snowing in Raccoon City. And two, it's not set in the present day, which this film is, because the main protagonist has a current iPhone. So it's not set in 1998, and it wasn't snowing in Raccoon City. Now, the director has gone on to say that, oh, well, he's sort of on the other side of the town. I guess it's a town in this, as opposed to a city. And, you know, like, you could imagine Leon and Claire going through the shit they're going through on one side, and then he's on the other side. Well, no, that's not possible, because it's snowing, and in RE2 and RE3 it's not snowing. So how does that even add up? How does that make sense? Like, there's so many things that we can pick apart where I feel like Zack Cregger played Resident Evil 4, he's finished Resident Evil Requiem, and he just has no idea about the rest of the series outside of those two games. That's what it seems like to me. Nor does he really care, being that he's an A-list director, to stick to continuity, and really, he doesn't care if he's pissing people off. Like, this is his own thing. This is a film that he made that I guess had some inspiration from Resident Evil 4, because that can happen, you know, being inspired from a book or a video game or an anime. And then he wrote a script, and then I guess Konstantin, you know, found out he had this script and said, hey, do you want to slap the name Resident Evil onto it, and we can make this a Resident Evil film. That's what's happened. Like, everybody wants to deny that, and they want to, you know, glaze this director because it's Zack Cregger and he made Barbarian and Weapons. So what? So what? There's plenty of films that James Cameron has made, you know, after I'd say Titanic, because Titanic was a good film, even though it's not really my thing, and they've been crap. Like, I haven't liked the Avatar films. You know, they were just slop to me, and he's rode that train till the wheels have eventually fallen off. And then you've got people like Ridley Scott, created one of the best films ever made, in my opinion, my favourite film of all time, Alien. His stuff, like Blade Runner, amazing, right? Gladiator, amazing film, but Alien Covenant, ooh, no. Like, not very good as an Alien film, and just not a very good film in general. I kind of half like that film, and half don't like that film. You know, you have so many directors. Sam Raimi, you know, made the Evil Dead films, love them to death, okay? Then he made Drag Me to Hell. I think that film's a load of garbage, personally. So it can happen, and Zack Cregger's only had 2 films that have been popular under his belt. You know, he's not even in the same category as a Fede Alvarez or, I don't know, any other new school director that's still kind of finding his footing, but he's come out the gate swinging, you know. And a lot of people didn't like Alien Romulus. I personally did. I think it's maybe like the Jurassic World of the Alien films. It's my 3rd favourite. Yeah, it's not perfect. It has things wrong with it, definitely. What film is perfect, okay? And what film's ever going to live up to, you know, the heights of Alien or Aliens? Not many. But I kind of like Alien Isolation and Romulus on the same level, you know. So I'd say that those 2 are my 3rd favourite after Aliens in terms of, you know, Alien movies and just Alien experiences, you know, with Isolation. But that's my point. My point is that Zack Cregger isn't vetted, yeah, and I don't care whether he's streamed Resident Evil 4 and Requiem and he says I'm the biggest Resident Evil fan ever. If that's the case, Zack, then this film trailer flopped at what it was trying to do, because for people like me that literally just want to see Resident Evil adapted properly, it failed. A lot of people have said it's hard to adapt the first game, or, you know, the film's not even out yet, how can you judge it? I've read the script leaks. I know that there's a lot of stuff that pretty much 90% of that script matches up with the trailer. You know, my argument is always, well, S.D. Perry managed to write a book about the first Resident Evil and did a great job, like an amazing job. That book is literally a 9 out of 10. It really is that good. I suggest that people not familiar with how you can adapt Resident Evil should go and read The Umbrella Conspiracy by S.D. Perry, and then have a look at Calibian Cove, Underworld, and also, you know, City of the Dead, which is the book adaptation of Resident Evil 2. Those 4 are great Resident Evil kind of books and adaptations in their own right. And I think that if he had bothered to maybe read, you know, the book, like the first Resident Evil book, or any director that was given this IP, I think that they would do a great job. They could take things from the book in the way that it's structured, and then just, you know, play the game, the first game, the remake, and then make a film out of that. I think it can be done. So a lot of people saying, oh, it can't be done. I think, like, again, you're a tourist in this. Like, you're a tourist because it can be done, and it should be done. The first game should be adapted, and that's where we should start, because that's all OG fans want. And if you are going to do something that is sort of just different in your own thing, then adapt Outbreak, or at least set it in 1998. Even Welcome to Raccoon City got that right. Even that film got that right. Like, set it in 1998. Don't have it snowing when it wasn't snowing during the outbreak, you know, and just have stuff that is actually Resident Evil, not stuff that you've just created and conjured up and then slapping the Resident Evil name onto it. I've actually heard some of the most retarded rebuttals to an argument, like stuff like, wasn't it snowing in Cove Veronica? Yeah, dipshit, it was set in Antarctica. It wasn't in Raccoon City or any Midwestern town, it was set in Antarctica. The part where it's snowing is because it's in Antarctica. And then other people said, oh yeah, but in Village it snows. Yeah, because it's in fucking Romania, that's why. Like, it's not Raccoon City. Why is it snowing in Raccoon City during an outbreak that supposedly takes place at the same time Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 take place? No, like, he's literally done what he wanted to do, and it doesn't add up, it doesn't make sense. And the fact that he's trying to link the games to the film in a desperate attempt to, you know, after the trailers dropped, to kind of appeal to fans, it's sad, to be honest with you. It's a bit, you know, it's a bit underwhelming, and it's quite sad. because it means I lost a bit of respect for that director. You know, I've lost a bit of respect for him, and like, I had no respect for Konstantin anyway to begin with. Realistically, I think they're a shithouse of a production company, personally. But yeah, it's sad, and it's like, well, don't try and link stuff. If you're going to do your own take on it, then do your own take on it. At one point, he said, "Oh no, I'm not following the games," and then he said, "Yeah, no, this takes place, you know, kind of when Leon and Claire get to Raccoon City, but it's just this guy, you know, this protagonist. I keep forgetting his name. Austin Abrams is the actor, I believe. He was in Weapons. He played the junkie, you know, the crackhead." Great. Like, you know, let's make him the main fucking protagonist of this Resident Evil, or supposedly Resident Evil film. Yeah, it just, I don't know, like, the trailer, we'll get into the trailer. The trailer, from what the trailer shows off, the trailer adds up a lot to what was revealed in the script leak. And it's got nothing to do with Resident Evil, I will say that right now. And it has this stalker enemy that follows the main protagonist throughout the entirety of the film, and it can basically absorb zombies and just any type of matter, and it becomes this bigger, you know, mass of just arms and legs. And that's what you see in the trailer when the parts of the body parts, you know, are kind of grabbing at that door. And I just think it just doesn't strike me as Resident Evil. That's more like something that would happen in Evil Within. If anyone's familiar with those games, with the Evil Within 1 and 2, you'd understand why something like that can happen in that world. But within Resident Evil, it just doesn't really fit. It you know, yes, it can happen. Like, a lot of people have been coping by saying, oh, it's Nix, it's, you know, it's his interpretation of Nix from Outbreak File 2. I don't think it is. I think it's just an enemy that he created because he's a fan of The Thing, he's a fan of, like, Evil Dead. I don't even think that happens in the previous Evil Dead films other than Rise. It happens in Rise. So I think he saw Rise, he's seen The Conjuring, you know, and just other films like that, The Thing, and then he's put that kind of amalgamation of that stuff into this film, and it doesn't look very Resident Evil, and it doesn't strike me as being Resident Evil. And I think that people are coping by saying, oh, it's Nix. It's not. It really isn't. Like, this is just something that he's put into the film. It's just a bit of a lazy enemy design, and just like, I don't know, monster to have, you know, in the film. It's just, like I said, ripping off The Thing, but without the class of that film, and how the Thing can assimilate people and you know, dogs and whatever else, like, just matter. So I think that this is this is just it's like I said, it was giving me like Conjuring vibes, and Evil Dead Rise, which is a film within that series that I didn't like. I like all the films up until that. You know, I just wasn't a fan of Rise. So I think that's what this monster is. And then you've got the Mr. XXL, as he's being referred to now, sort of just plopped into a sewer, and even the director said that he got ideas for that enemy from that monster from Dune. So a lot of people saying, oh, it reminds them of. I'm not a fan of Dune. I'm not very familiar with Dune, to be honest. But I've seen images of the character that they're saying that this bioweapon. I want to say bioweapon. It's not really this monster. Looks like, and he does definitely, like, and the director's even said he was inspired by Dune. So this fat dude is obviously straight out of Dune, basically. And what happens with him is, apparently, like, the belly splits open and some infected rats just burst out, and they start chasing Austin Abrams' character. You know, Brian, that's it. Character's name is Brian. They start chasing Brian. So that's what happened, you know, in that part. And I was like, that's cool. That's all right. I quite like that. You know, I don't mind that, actually. I think that's pretty cool. That's maybe the most Resident Evil thing in the film, definitely, from what I've read. But, again, it's still small potatoes when you think that fans like myself want to see a hunter, you know, chasing his ass throughout the sewer, or a spider, like a giant spider coming after him. And a lot of these zombies, apparently the zombies are only in the film a little bit, which again doesn't make sense. This is a zombie film. But he said no, this is obviously about kind of infected more so than zombies, so it means that just all these other things are going to get infected, and You know, we've got like dogs with tentacles coming out of their mouths, and again, it's like he's seen bits from Resident Evil 5 with Ouroboros, Nix from Outbreak File 2, and you know, obviously Resident Evil 4 having sort of tentacles and stuff popping out of villagers' heads. He's seen all that stuff, and he's gone, yeah, I'll just put tentacles in it. And if you think of it from a IP rights point of view, putting tentacles in a horror film, you know, it could be anything. Like, it doesn't have to be inspired by Resident Evil 4 or 5, or even The Thing. You can still put sort of zombies with tentacles in a film, a mutated dog with tentacles popping out of his face in a film, and, you know, not have kind of companies coming after you saying, hey, you ripped that off, you ripped that straight from us, or, you know, from this film or this IP. So that's how he covered his back. Yeah, that's how he covered himself, is he just took something that is very generic, like, you know, monsters with tentacles. We've seen it many, many times, and he slapped it in this film in case he didn't get the rights to make it a Resident Evil film. He could have then, like he said in his own words, if Constantin and Sony didn't approach me, you know, and Capcom didn't approach me to make this a Resident Evil film, I still would have released it. And so he could have released this film, called it anything else, and there you go. It would have still been the same film. So that's basically what this film is. It's a film that was inspired by many things, Evil Dead 2, The Thing, Resident Evil 4, that could also stand on its own as its own thing, but not in a way that it should be able to use the Resident Evil name. Do you get what I'm saying? The Resident Evil license. Like, it could be its own thing, but because they approached him and he had this script floating about, or he sent it to them, you know, to review, and they said, yeah, this sounds good, let's slap the name onto it, you know, now it's a Resident Evil film. But if you watch the film, you know, when you watch the film, if you read the script, if you read the script, you don't mind being spoiled, then you'll see that this is genuinely its own thing. It's got very little to do with Resident Evil, and stuff has been placed into the film to tie it to Resident Evil. So now we have Umbrella in the film. The characters are now Umbrella employees. You know, the dog is now a zombie dog infected with the T virus. And now we have sort of overturned police cars that have RCPD, which is Raccoon City Police Department, even though it's not, because everybody that knows the games, knows the lore and the history, it's RPD. Yeah, that's what it's always been, Raccoon City Police Department, but it's really like the Raccoon Police Department. It's always been that, but you couldn't even get that right. It's now RCPD, so Raccoon City Police Department. So, do you see what I'm saying? But it's been slapped in there, and things like that make it seem like it was a rush job. You know, like he went, oh yeah, just slap RCPD in there, and he forgot, because he's not too familiar with, you know, Resident Evil 2 or 3, that it's actually RPD. And apparently the flat jacket that Brian, you know, gets hold of, that's got RCPD on it. That's not hard to stick in a film, you know, get that sort of made up, stick the lettering on there, and then just have it in the film. This is what I'm trying to say. It could have been its own thing if it hadn't, you know, got the rights to use the IP that it's supposedly based on. So there's a load of things that he stuck into the film when it came to filming, knowing, okay, now I'm making a Resident Evil film, that are easily kind of either placed or replaceable. Now, during the trailer, you get to see zombies kind of throwing themselves off of buildings, and they're kind of like zombie mortars, essentially, which started to remind me of like some parts of Requiem, where you are actually fighting zombies that can control, you know, these mortars. It was quite funny, but I think in Requiem, because it's a video game, and because, I don't know, because Resident Evil does get batshit crazy sometimes, you know, I didn't mind it. Like, yeah, it was over the top, it was ridiculous and silly, but I just found it quite fun. Like, it was quite fun, you know, they retain kind of their old memories of what they used to do, and they're like BSAA kind of, you know, zombies, so they're firing mortars at Leon and stuff. I thought it was cool. There's lore behind that, you know, there's a reason behind that. In this film, it's just zombies chucking themselves off buildings to to get at Brian, and it just reminded me of Matrix Resurrections. Unfortunately, that's not a film that you want to remind me of in your trailer. But yeah, I think that maybe he saw that in Resurrections and he repurposed that for the film. Why are the zombies chucking themselves off buildings to get to Brian? I have no fucking clue. I'm guessing they just want to infect him or whatever, and so they're just throwing themselves off the buildings. I thought it looked silly and a bit hokey. So yeah, there was that. A lot of people have also made the argument that it reminds them of Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil 7 was its own thing, standalone, and it actually didn't have anything to do with the rest of the series. Where's that coming from? I'm confused. This is why I say a lot of people are tourists at the moment. Resident Evil 7 definitely links to the rest of the series, and if you knew about the rest of the series, you could see that. Not only does Resident Evil 7 talk about the connections who play a big pivotal role within the series, it also links to like Revelations 1 and just bioweapons in general and how they, have been unleashed on American soil once again. Things like Blue Umbrella. You'd only know about Umbrella if you'd played the rest of the series and why Blue Umbrella exists. Characters like Chris Redfield, even though he doesn't really look like Chris Redfield, it was still Chris Redfield. At least for now. I don't know whether the next game is going to reveal that wasn't actually Chris Redfield. Maybe it was a clone. I don't know, right? Because the series does get crazy. I'm not saying the Resident Evil series hasn't got crazy and doesn't get crazy. I'm just saying that they try to fit it all together, and there is a link, definitely, from game to game and within the series. Even if that link can sometimes be just batshit insane, there are links. And so RE7 definitely fits into the lore and the canon of the rest of the series, so I don't know why people are saying that. And so that's another excuse that people are using for this film. Oh, well, it's a standalone thing, like Resident Evil 7 or Village. Village actually fits in, by the way, with the rest of the series, as it has links to Spencer, and also it follows on from RE7, and you get to see how the mold was created, or at least the origins of the mold, the mutomycete, I think it was called. So yeah, loads of connections. It was even going to have Ada Wong at one point. This film, however, doesn't have any connections other than it's got the T-virus in it, Umbrella are in it towards the end, and it's got some zombies. That's basically the connections that it has. I don't think there's any Plaga within the film, so he's got that completely wrong, because the Plaga is the parasite that then can turn a human being into a mass of tentacles and, whatever else, okay? Mutate. It can mutate sort of, humans and animals and things where then their bodies split open and tentacles erupt from their bodies. But it also mutates them in different ways. It's not just, do you know what I mean? It's not just a massive tentacle that comes out. Sometimes, you can get this huge parasite, this kind of millipede thing with a massive mouth that can chomp you, or you get something that's akin to an El Gigante, which is a huge troll-like monster, or even a regenerator, where it can just regenerate its limbs and just fucking hounds you down. So the Plaga, much like the G-virus and the T-virus, can mutate stuff in all kinds of crazy ways. And so I don't understand why directors, including Cregger, don't just adapt something like that with their own standalone character, their own standalone story, but it links to the rest of the series and the lore with, a Plaga basically being the result of an outbreak. Or maybe even linking it to some of the other games where Umbrella synthetically created the NE parasite from the Plaga. We're talking about the remake timeline here. And, it infects a town somewhere in America, in Midwest America, right? A bit like Raccoon City, but sort of similar kind of ties to the outbreak in Raccoon City, but it's its own thing, much like 7 was situated in Louisiana, in Dolby, Louisiana. It was his own thing. It was an outbreak that happened in that particular part of America, and they could just do that, but for a film. And I don't understand why they don't do that. That's why there's so much lore and there's so much stuff that they can pull from the game series. They don't have to be like, yeah, it's the T-Virus, and it's Umbrella, and it's this, and it's that. They don't have to do that. They can make their own thing that's a standalone film. People who don't have a clue about Resident Evil could go sit their butts down and watch this film, and then get introduced to sort of the world of Resident Evil without it having to be like, well, do you know what the T-Virus is, and do you know what Umbrella is, and etc, etc. They could literally make a film that has a plaga that just infects people, and then, you know, it leads to an outbreak in a Midwestern town, much like this film is doing, and then people go, oh, that's cool, like, and it gives you the backstory of the plaga, and it kind of links to the games, but you know what I mean, like in a clever way, and people go, oh, what's that, and then they go and watch, you know, some of the games on YouTube, and then they get to see, oh wow, like, okay, this is like linking to Resident Evil 4. Or if you had the mold in the film, you use the mold as the virus, you know, oh, this links to Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 7. Like, it's great, that's a great way of doing it. But no, this film wants to slap the T-Virus and an Umbrella facility into it with stuff that just mimics the plaga, I guess, and Ouroboros. Really? Like, is this what we're doing? When I watched the entirety of the trailer, I've watched it a few times, all I got was like Conjuring vibes. It looked like the Evil Within at one point. The town looks like it's out of Silent Hill. It doesn't resemble Resident Evil. There's a bit where he goes to grab some keys. Brian goes to grab some keys and a body's pulled into the dark, you know, into some shadow. And it's like, okay, that's kind of Resident Evil, definitely. But it's also every horror film trope that's ever, you know, that I've ever watched, basically. Like, it reminds me of Resident Evil because Resident Evil incorporates horror tropes because it is a horror game series, and so you're not really winning me over with something that I've seen like 100 times in other horror films. I think that it would have been a lot more clever, and I would have respected Cregger, and it would just have been smarter to adapt the first game, you know, and then maybe just put your spin on it, do it in your own way. Don't make something that was like Welcome to Raccoon City that, you know, just fucking shit the bed when it came to smashing loads of like lore and Easter eggs and just references into one film. That's where that film flopped. But a lot of people's arguments, or I've seen recently that Dust Golem, him again, has leaked the fact that Capcom don't allow Konstantin or Sony, you know, or Cregger to use certain things from the IP. Well, that's bullshit. And a lot of people have been trying to defend this and say, oh yeah, he's right, that's why this film doesn't resemble Resident Evil. That's bullshit. Because as we all know, from the Paul Anderson films to Welcome to Raccoon City, which had a dog shit ass low budget, they were able to take stuff from the IP, they were able to use stuff from the source material and the IP in these kind of crappy films. Like the Paul Anderson ones got the Axeman from RE5, they were able to use that, they were still able to use the liquor. In multiple films, they were able to use the Plaga, Wesker. Like Welcome to Raccoon City, you know, if you just go and read up about that film, or just watch the film, or just watch clips, you'll see that there's loads of stuff that they were able to use from the IP. Like, definitely. They even had unused concepts and things that they weren't able to use in the final film, where they had Hunters and Mr. X, and just loads and loads and loads of stuff they were given access to. So for Capcom to suddenly turn around and go, oh, well actually, nah, we're not going to let you use a lot from RIP when you've got an A-list director and a much, much larger budget, just doesn't make sense. And again, it's bullshit. It's 100% bullshit. Like, you can easily call out Dust Golem and his bullshit on this one. You know, we're not talking about video game leaks here, but this is complete shit. And it's a farce that he's come up with. And this is the main reason I can't stand this dude. He lies. He just lies. He's a compulsive liar that will lie about stupid little things like Capcom not giving out the IP to these, you know, these studios and this director so they can make the best film they can make and maybe get more and more people into Resident Evil who then buy the games or buy the CG films or whatever it is, you know. Capcom win in this situation. But nah, like, you know, we've got an A-list director. There's loads of money being thrown at this project. Yeah, let's hold the IP down. No, it doesn't make sense. They didn't do that, and so that's complete bullshit. So people are also coping again when they say, yeah, well, Capcom didn't give them you know, any of the material from the games. They've just given them the bare minimum. Bullshit. You know, they gave the director and the studio that handled Welcome to Raccoon City. I say studios. Constantin again, wasn't it? Yeah. They gave them layouts to the RPD, for fuck's sake, and the Spencer Mansion. That doesn't sound like a studio that's, you know, being overly tight when it comes to lending out things from the IP. But yeah, it's people coping. There's a lot of Creggerites, we're calling them at the moment, who just smelled Zack Cregger's farts, and because he was in Whitest Kids You Know, I never watched that. I think it was more of an American thing. I think Whitest Kids You Know, that was more popular in America. They're just eating everything up that he pushes out, really. And so we've got like a split, definitely. And then you've got, like I said, the tourists. It's like the Creggerites who, you know, they love Cregger to bits and he can't do no wrong. And then you've got the OG Resident Evil fans on the other side that are like, I don't give a shit who he is. Like, this doesn't look like Resident Evil, you know, he's just getting out his own film and they're slapping the name onto it. And you've got people in the middle who I call the tourists, who claim to be like, I'm a Resident Evil fan. And when you ask them what game they started with, they say, oh, well, Resident Evil 7, because, you know, it was popular at the time and I played it in VR, so, you know, I'm a proper fan, I'm a true fan. And then when something sort of is adapted and it looks nothing like Resident Evil, they're like, well, yeah, but Resident Evil 7 wasn't really like Resident Evil. And you're just sort of face palming and go, oh my god, I've got to do this again. And then not understanding that any of us, all of us, just want the first game adapted. We just want zombies in a mansion and mutated bioweapons in a mansion. That's all we want. That's all we want. And it can be done within a 90 or just over 90-minute runtime. And it can be scaled back a little bit, you know, and chopped up a little bit, and it would still work. I think the latest Mortal Kombat film has actually proven that. Like, they were able to do what they did with that film and still keep it faithful to the source material. It can be done, honestly. Or you can just make your own thing. You can just be a Resident Evil adaptation that links to the games in some way. You can do it. It can be done. But what this looks like is a horror film that Zack was creating with loads of inspiration from just everything, including things like Doom and Matrix Resurrections of all films, and then just slapping the IP name onto it. That's what has happened with this film. And I really advise that you go and read the leaks if you don't understand how far off the mark this is. Quotes from the director like, yeah, Mr. XXL, that's my nemesis for this film. That's my version of the nemesis. That just pisses me off, and it pisses a lot of people off, because he knows what he's talking about. And at the same time, he's rubbing shit in fans' faces by going, yeah, like, the nemesis, this, you know, unkillable stalker enemy that just chases you through Raccoon City. Or here you go, there's some fat dude sitting in a sewer. That's my nemesis. Like, he knows what he's doing. He's just trying to piss people off. He's trolling people. This whole film looks like it's going to troll people. That's the issue I have, you know. Stuff like mutated dogs, or a mutated dog with, like, tentacles that kind of pop out from its mouth and shit like that. Yeah, like, in concept, seeing that on the big screen, even though it has just very little to do with, you know, the Raccoon City outbreak, maybe it's a bit more akin to Resident Evil 4. Seeing that on the big screen in live action would be cool, and it will be cool if I actually do decide to go and see the film. I'm kind of debating whether I should or not. I don't know at this point. I'm like, should I bother? Is it going to piss me off? You know, should I bother? Basically wasting the money. I want to go and see Street Fighter, and I want to see Mortal Kombat 2. But when it comes to to Resident Evil, I don't know. I just don't know if I want to waste my money and go and see something that's going to piss me off. But seeing, like, a mutated kind of, you know, sort of tentacle dog on a big screen in a horror film, that's cool. I like that, because it's not your generic, boring-ass, Conjuring, Insidious, whatever other fucking generic horror film, you know, beastie that we're getting to see. It's this cool kind of, you know, mutation that's a bit like the Thing and a bit like the dogs from Resident Evil 4. So that's quite enticing. Like, that entices me to go and see the film, but at the same time, it's got nothing to do with the outbreak in Raccoon City, and that's what this film is trying to portray. And I mean, if this isn't proof that this film is doing everything it can to not be connected really to the series it's based on, you've got like stuff like the dog that attacks Brian, you know, with tentacles coming out of his mouth, isn't a Doberman, so it doesn't resemble a Cerberus. You could have literally made it a Doberman, like, and had that tying to the games, you know. Like the part where he's slamming the door shut and all the zombies coming after him, that's only at the end of the film. He fights off zombie toddlers with a broom. Yeah, sounding like Resident Evil to you. He basically at the end, spoilers, not that I care or I think anyone else cares. If you're a true Resident Evil fan, you're not going to really care about this. Yeah, he mutates basically. The thing that he's carrying, I believe, is either the cure or it's a vial of the T-virus. But he meets a bunch of scientists that work for Umbrella that want to cure him, and he basically transforms or he mutates before that can happen. And so it says specifically here that he ends up having like a tentacle arm that then kills all the scientists. Now that's given me Resident Evil Extinction vibes, big time, you know. And Cregger said that he hasn't seen any of the films, the Resident Evil films, but then he's basically mirroring something that happened in one of the films. I think that's lies, basically. I think that's some bullshit. He's definitely seen some clips or something, like, because that's very, very similar. Yeah, and just the thing that chases him, it can just sort of like assimilate, you know, zombies and other things, other organic matter, and it just chases him throughout the film, apparently. And the zombies only show up, I think he said like the zombies only show up 3 times during the whole film, something to that effect. So yeah, you've got obviously him wearing the, you know, the vest, which is RCPD, which is wrong again. So yeah, it just doesn't. There's loads of stuff. You can go and read the script for yourself, and the trailer matches up with the script leaks. Like 100%, it does. Like 100%, it's spot on. And this sounds like the most un-Resident Evil film that they've actually released, which is surprising to me, because I had so much faith in it. I had so much faith in Cregger. And the fact that Sony were kind of on board as well. I think Constantine are owned by Sony, but at the same time, Sony literally were like, yeah, we want that. You know, we want that film. And so it's a collaboration with Sony and Constantine and Capcom and then Cregger. And I had so much faith in it. I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And then I read the script like months and months and months ago. And I was like really disappointed, because I thought, well, if he can't do it, and you know the amount of money that's got thrown at him and this film, and they still can't pull it off, then we have no hope. I think it's time to stop trying to adapt Resident Evil into live action. I think it's just not working, and I don't think it's ever going to work, unfortunately. And I don't think we're finding directors that can literally take something so simple, something as simplistic as a mansion with zombies and beasties, all type of beasties, trying to eat a military team within, I don't know, a 90 or just over 90 minutes runtime. That's dark, foreboding, little bit of action here and there, but it's pretty much a survival film with horror elements. I don't think, if we can't do it with this, and we haven't done it with the previous films, I don't think it's going to happen. You know, unless you get a director that understands the source material properly. You can't just play RE4 and Requiem and be like, yeah, I get it, I understand the source material, and then just have like Easter eggs and references that don't add up to, you know, what it's trying to reference, basically, at all. Or you're making a bodge job of it. Now, the argument, to sort of round this video off and speak on this, the argument that some people say is, oh, you know, Resident Evil fans are so toxic and you're too negative and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. Look, at the end of the day, if we don't stand our ground and say this is not acceptable, yeah, slapping the Resident Evil name onto any old thing that you want to slap it onto, please see the Netflix show to understand where I'm coming from and what I'm talking about. If we don't stand our ground and push back against this sort of stuff, then we are left with subpar and just pointless adaptations and stuff that we don't want, to see, instead of stuff that we could see if a director or a studio decided to really, really go for it, and please fans. And also everyday moviegoers would also enjoy it. A lot of us know this, because a mansion with zombies and a giant snake, along with a super zombie, giant humanoid fucking Terminator thing with a claw, chasing a military team around a mansion trying to skin them alive, it works. It would work for audiences not familiar with the IP, and it would probably get them into the IP from like the earlier games onwards. Do you see what I'm saying? And and then appealing to fans like myself and other people. That's what we want to see. That's all we want to see. We don't want to see, oh well, stuck some tentacle monsters in my film and it's got a green herb reference, and that's Resident Evil. Like, we don't want to see that. That's not what we want to see. Like, we've been waiting for years and years and years to see someone competent adapt the first Resident Evil. So no, the fan base on one side isn't toxic, we're passionate. That's the difference. We're very, very passionate about the IP, and we love the roots of Resident Evil. We love Resident Evil's roots and where it began, and I don't think, much like the first Alien and Aliens, I don't think anything can top like the first couple games, just because of the setting and the atmosphere, and the actual horror that was woven into those experiences. It was in Resident Evil's DNA to begin with, and I think that's all we want to see. And the fact is, we have loads of games now that try all these different things, and sometimes it's action horror, and then sometimes it's straight horror. Requiem, pulled that off perfectly, in my personal opinion. But we don't have anything that calls back or harkens back to those older experiences, those older games. And like the Spencer Mansion's long gone at this point. So seeing that brought to life on the big screen, is something we really, really want to see, and we've been yearning for ages. And yeah, Welcome to Raccoon City kind of did that, but again, that was just a mess of a film, But at least incorporated these things from the IP into the film, and it wore them strongly on its sleeve, definitely. Like, sometimes for the worse, but hey, it still did that. Now, I'm not trying to stick up for Welcome to Raccoon City. It's a fucking mess of a film. It's not very scary. There's all kinds of things wrong with it. But going back and circling back to my first kind of point in the video is that it had loads and loads of references, and it borrowed loads of stuff from the IP, and Capcom openly gave that to the director, and Konstantin to use. Okay, so this whole argument of, they're gatekeeping the IP is bullshit. It's rubbish, especially having the CG films as well. Just have everything from the Plagas to Plaga zombies, to tyrants, to everything, like new viruses and new villains and things like that. It's past the point now where they're overly protective of the IP. I will say that we're way past the days of the first Paul Anderson film. So yeah, they're not gatekeeping anything. That's just been made up to, glaze Cregger's film and make excuses for this film, for this generic horror film that Cregger's kind of created, and then Konstantin will once again slap the Resident Evil name onto it. So yeah, it's just it's trying to defend a film that has nothing really to do with Resident Evil, and it doesn't. I don't care how many references to Umbrella Corporation it has in there, or the fact that Umbrella's in there. From what I've read and what I've seen in the trailer, just even if I hadn't read the leaked script, and I saw the trailer, I'd probably be scratching my head going, it doesn't seem like Resident Evil, because it really doesn't. I don't know why people feel that way or think that it resembles Resident Evil, because it doesn't. To me, it doesn't anyway. Like people have said, it's more like Silent Hill or Evil Within. That's what it feels like a bit more. So yeah, I mean, different strokes for different folks. Some people are going to be like, oh, this is how I feel when I play a Resident Evil game, and that's fine. I can't I can't argue with how you feel when it comes to an IP or a horror kind of property. If you feel like it looks like Resident Evil, feels like it from watching the trailer, then that's cool, that's fine. But for me, I don't feel that way. With all that being said, I feel like Cregger's horror film will be a competent horror film, definitely. I don't think it's going to be a very good Resident Evil film, but I think that it will be a competent horror film. Will it be enjoyable? Probably, yes. It probably will. Was Weapons enjoyable? Yes, to a point. It was really good. I think the main actress who plays the witch, I think she was really, really good, and she was deserved of that Oscar that she won. I think that Barbarian was a better film. Definitely, I enjoyed Barbarian, and I could see hints of Resident Evil 7 in that film. That felt more like Resident Evil 7 than, say, this film does, But then this film isn't trying to adapt Resident Evil 7 or 4, it's trying to adapt Resident Evil 2 and 3, going by Cregger's words, and it fails in that aspect, definitely. So, will it be an enjoyable film? Yeah, most probably. Yeah, it's going to be better than a lot of the slop that comes out, in this day and age, but... yeah, I just think, much like the Netflix show and all the other films, using the IP, other than Welcome to Raccoon City, which was the most faithful, believe it or not, I think that, using the IP's name and just slapping it onto any old horror thing is redundant at this point. I think it's just pissing a lot of us off. That's what it's doing. So... yeah, could they competently make a film based on the first game? Like I said, they managed to do it for little bits and parts of Raccoon City, of Welcome to Raccoon City, and I actually didn't mind those bits, definitely. It could have been done a lot better, 100%, yeah, 100%, but was it enjoyable? Was that particular part of the film enjoyable? Yeah, it was, but it just depressed me that it could have been a whole film. It could have been in a whole film and tightened up a bit more, and just, it could have been a lot better. So, it was depressing that we haven't had a film that just handles the mansion incident and then, goes full on, like, full force with that. So, I don't know whether I'm going to see this Zack Cregger horror film that is Resident Evil in name only. Maybe I will. It might be something to go and see with the lady at some point, when it does come out. But I'm going to have to, I don't know, I'm going to have to just decide whether I want to or not, whether I want to waste that money. Or maybe I should just play Resident Evil Requiem again. I'd have a much, much better time. And at least I'm playing something that is Resident Evil. So yeah, or I could just pick up and play Resident Evil 7 or Village or any Resident Evil game. I could play, the remake again. I could read the book again. I could read the comic of, the adaptations of Resident Evil 1 again. So this is what I'm saying. It comes down to, am I going to go and see something that's really going to piss me off? Or am I going to go and see a film where I sit there and go, it's got nothing to do with Resident Evil, but I kind of like the film in its own right. I just don't know. So yeah, I'm just on the fence about that. Like with MK2, I want to go and see that film. Like, there's nothing that's going to stop me seeing that film. I'm going to go and see it. With Street Fighter, I think it looks like a hell of a lot of fun, and so I want to go and see that film. I went to see Super Mario Galaxy recently, and I thought that was fun. It was a fun film, definitely. But yeah, with Resident Evil, it's just the one out of all of them that just does not resemble, something that I fucking hold dear to my heart, a series that I hold dear to my heart and I truly love. And so yeah, this just doesn't resemble it. So I don't want to go and watch a film where I'm literally going to just be sat there going, wow, this is just a cash grab. Do you know what I mean? This is just a reason for them to still hold on to the rights, adapting the films of Resident Evil. So yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do, really. But sound off in the comments if you want about this this new Resident Evil film. And I'll catch you again next time. Have a good rest of your week. Peace.